are we kidding ourselves here? Isn't that just making explicit, their idea of maybe very literally creating, a kind of palace guard of journalists and all that? Has it been your experience that that's very much the case anyway? Maybe that's too cynical of you.
I think that this just puts it on full display for the American public to see with their own eyes.
That's my point.
Yeah, instead of just journalists experiencing it one-on-one. And what's scarier for me is like this. It appears that the Pentagon is at war with journalists and journalism and the fourth estate.
But haven't they always been, I guess is my point. Or at least that seems to be my experience.
Yes, but it seems much more forceful and deliberate and just wide out in the open. And it at the end of the day, like journalists like myself and Nancy and so many other people who report on the like, we're not against the Pentagon. Like, we are for the Pentagon and the millions of service members that it represents and the families that it represents. And that's why we do the reporting that we do. Same thing with the VA. Like, newsrooms like the War Horse are for the veterans that have served our country. And pitting the DoD leadership, pitting the people like Dave and public affairs officers against journalists like Nancy, like that's wrong. Like, we both have a shared goal of defending American ideals. We're at work. Like, we're not at war with one another, just like Marty Barron of the Washington Post would say.
Right. Dave, how did you negotiate that relationship between journalists, and what the Pentagon wanted to frame? Because I'm really talking about framing. It's you can talk about, the history of military conflict also includes a history of, misinformation shaped. I'll give you an example. Judith Miller, in the run-up to the Iraq War, reports that Saddam Hussein has these aluminum tubes, and they can only be used to enrich uranium, and he's building a weapons program. They pop it into the New York Times. It's a front page story. And literally the next day, Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice go on, meet the press and all kinds of other places and say, even the New York Times, no friend of this administration, the Bush administration, is reporting that Saddam Hussein has a nuclear program and we've got to get in there. And what it turned out to be was, and I think that the famous phrase was, we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud. That was the big warning. Well, turns out that phrase came from the Iraq Working Group. It was from a PR person, and that information was fed to Judith Miller from the administration.